My beautiful friends, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to come on and do a video about some of the wounds from this book. I've been trying to do videos about specific wounds from this book because I do talk a lot about these wounds in my readings. And I thought that I would do these videos for those of you who, are trying not to watch love readings. But I believe that the relationships that we attract, the energy that we attract, can sometimes... That was weird. It just froze on me. So I believe that the energy we attract or the situations we find ourselves in, or even just attracting the same type of energy in, but in different people, in different situations like jobs, things like that. I believe that it's meant to mirror back to us lessons and wounds that we can heal. So I was going to do the chakra blockages, but I've decided to do something else today. One thing that I'm noticing while I'm working through this book and while I read from it for you guys is that a lot of these wounds stem from our childhood and from mother and father wounds specifically. And then we develop, like, for example, maybe you have a mother wound, and then that leads to a fear of abandonment wound, and then that leads to like a lack of, like a fear of putting up boundary wound. A lot of these wounds are connected. And for me, what I'm realizing is a lot of them stem from parental wounding. So if you haven't watched the video where I read about the mother-father wound, that's a good place to start. And I'm actually going to later, when I have a moment, I'm going to create a playlist. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but it'll be obvious once I add it, where I'm going to put all of these videos, they're not readings, videos about these wounds in that playlist so that you can find them. And, I believe that a lot of healing, it starts with self-awareness. And the more we are aware of our wounds and why we act the way we do, the more we can see the lessons in them, we can see when they're being triggered and step out of those cycles, because that's ultimately how you heal them, is you step out of those cycles and you start living from a more healed place. And for me, healing has been life-changing. And not only in a sense that it's changed my life, but also I am autistic and ADHD. And I even found that through healing, it helped me, in no way am I saying it cured the things I struggled with being neurodivergent, but it's also helped me in that aspect as well. And yeah, healing has been life-changing. And as much as, I hope that what was happening is, as I started to heal, I wanted the people around me to heal. And I thought that I could help them heal or convince them to heal. And that's not true. We talk about that. But I believe by healing ourselves, we help to heal others. And I do get a lot of people who want help with their healing. And again, this book, I mention it, you guys ask me about it all the time. It's called Sacred Shadows by the Reckoning Co. You can find it on Amazon. She also has an Etsy shop. And I've actually gone ahead and bought her other books because this book it's become my favorite book ever. And I don't even know what her other books are about, but I want to learn more from her. So specifically, hang on. It's funny, I usually have, when I'm doing these videos about healing, I usually get like dog hair on my lips for some reason. And I was just thinking about that, about how just like when you have a pet and they shed all over you, and even when they pass away, you find their hair everywhere. It kind of reminds me of wounds, about how they leave an imprint on us forever. There's, until we heal them, they keep showing up or they keep popping up. Anyway, weird comparison, but that's what I was hearing. So, I think for a lot of my life, I was running from these wounds and I was just feeling like I was broken, or I would feel resentment towards my childhood or resentment towards the situations and the people I kept attracting. And I thought there was something broken about me. So for a long time, I think I was really running from these wounds. And then when I started to heal and awaken, I realized how important it is that we heal these wounds. So the wounds that I want to talk about today, I'm going to do 3. I have them bookmarked. The abandonment wound, and again, all of these stem from usually a mother or father wound. I want to talk about the attachment wound and the codependency wound. And again, this book is amazing. And even though I didn't think I had all this wounding, like I knew that I was wounded, but I didn't know I had all of these wounds. I find that I resonate with every one of these wounds in this book. So yeah, I just wanted to come on and talk about it. So abandonment wound. Now, some of the wounds that we have, we might not have even experienced it in our lifetime, but it's possible that our parents experienced it and it's been passed down through generational trauma. Like this abandonment wound. I did struggle with like a wound of neglect when I was younger. I'm not saying my parents neglected me, but I did feel like my needs weren't always met. I did feel unseen. At times I felt unloved, which caused me to feel like I had to earn their love or overperform, which for me looked like, I mentioned this in a reading, from a very young age, I would like clean every weekend and I would make my parents coffee, bring them breakfast in bed because I was trying to earn that love. And I'm not saying it's their fault, but I didn't feel like it was freely given. I felt like I had to earn it. And I didn't ever feel abandoned by my parents physically because my dad did work away, which was confusing as a child. Like, why isn't my dad here? But I know in my mother's history, there was abandonment. And I can see how it was passed down to me, even though my parents had never abandoned me. This abandonment wound, I do have it, even though it never happened to me. I have a fear of abandonment because of what my mom went through. The same way that I can see in my children some of their wounds or their behaviors stem from my childhood trauma, even though they have never experienced the things that I experienced as a child. Some of their fears come from my trauma that was passed down to them. And, I'm also a firm believer in breaking the cycle so that we don't keep passing this on from generation to generation. I feel quite confident that my children will not be passing these wounds on. And it takes a lot of bravery and strength to heal and to look at your wounding. Sometimes I wish I could show you my kids to see the benefit of healing wounds because, again, I'm quite confident that they won't grow up and repeat the same cycles that I did. I also believe in teaching my children about these wounds, and I try and teach them. I try and teach them more health, like I try and teach them about healthy communication and to not internalize things. Anyway, I'm a firm believer in breaking that cycle. And for me, it involved like that black sheep theory. It involved me having to release my family because they weren't ready to heal. It's not easy to be the black sheep, to be the cycle breaker. But like I said, when I look at my children, when I see how different my children are than I was when I was a kid, it makes everything worth it. And it just makes everything worth it. And it's why I'm so passionate about it. So I'm going to read about these wounds. But like I said, for me, what I'm realizing is that these wounds, they're all connected. And it seems like they stem from a parental wounding or even from things that were passed down from your parents. So like an example, my mom, I know she struggled with being abandoned when she was a child by one of her parents. And so she showed up differently. She never abandoned me, but I still have this abandonment wound. Anyway, so I'm going to read the abandonment wound first. The greatest fear in the world is of the opinions of others. And the moment you are unafraid of the crowd, you are no longer a sheep, you become a lion. A great roar arises in your heart, the roar of freedom. It says you are no longer a sheep. I'm still a black sheep. But, that fear of abandonment can show up in different ways. It can show up, like for me, I would stay in unhealthy situations. I would stay in unhealthy jobs, like toxic environments. I would stay in friendships that were where I would have to pretend to be someone else, like a sheep. I would have to mask who I was just to keep that friend, or I felt like I had to be like them to keep them in my life. I see it a lot in my readings. The abandonment wound can lead to that chaser energy or that runner energy, or anxious attachment, anxious avoidant, those type of things. And oftentimes, people who need to heal these wounds, for example, someone who's anxiously attached, me, I feel like I've made leaps and bounds on that one. But what happens is the anxiously attached attracts the anxious avoidant. And I believe it's meant to help us heal that wound so we don't keep repeating that cycle. Because for my entire life, I was a people pleaser. I was, I want to talk about the attachment wound when I move on to that. But this abandonment wound kept me, again, in really unhealthy situations. I was afraid to share my voice. I was afraid to be myself. I was afraid to put up boundaries because I had this fear that if I did, I would be abandoned. So it really does affect these wounds stemming from the mother and father wound, affect how we show up in our jobs, in our relationships, and how we show up for ourselves, Someone with a fear of abandonment wound, it can go one or two ways. Either you abandon yourself and you hold on to unhealthy things, or you stay small and you follow the crowd. It can also go another way where, because you have a fear of abandonment, you never allow yourself to be in a situation where you could be abandoned. And that can look like abandoning connections, where when you feel attached to them or when you feel love, you can push it away because you have a fear of abandonment. Anyway, let's get into it. Abandonment leaves an imprint, a whisper in the mind that says, if I was truly worthy, they would have stayed. It convinces you that your belonging is conditional, that love must be earned, and that rejection is proof of your unworthiness. But this is an illusion. The deepest wound is not that someone left. It is the belief that their departure determined your value. When you free yourself from seeking external validation, from measuring your worth by who chooses you and does not choose you, something profound happens. The fear dissolves. So this is what I mean, like being aware of the wound, seeing that you're measuring your worth by if someone chooses you or not. Just being aware of that can heal that wound, right? You stop chasing approval and start standing in your own presence. You realize that the love you've been searching for has been within you all along. You are not the echoes of the ones who walked away. You are not the unchosen, unworthy, or disposable. You are sovereign. Your heart is not something to be proven. It is something to be honored. And as you step forward, no longer defining yourself by absence, but by presence, the roar of your own freedom emerges. The fear of being abandoned cannot haunt you when you no longer abandon yourself. And sometimes by trying to seek that external validation or people pleasing or things like that, you do abandon yourself. I can give you an example of how the knowledge of this wound has helped me. So I'll talk about it when I get to the attachment wound. But I've always been someone who becomes very attached to things, items, food, people, friends, jobs, and I've been healing this abandonment wound. So I had this friendship where I was people pleasing. I was kind of following, afraid to say no, things like that. And I was holding on to this friendship because I was afraid that if I let it go, I wouldn't have any other friends. And, I've been trying to heal chaser energy, over-giving, people-pleasing, over-apologizing, hiding who I truly am for like the last 5 or 6 years. And in the past, I might be getting a little bit too far ahead of myself. I'll get back to that in a minute. I'll just tell you about this friendship thing. So, had a friendship where it felt like I was chasing. It felt like it wasn't aligned with me, and I was holding on tightly to it because I had this fear of abandonment, and I had this fear that if I spoke up and said something, that it would cause an argument, so I tried to keep the peace. And this friend stopped responding to me, and oh my gosh, bestie, if you're watching this, I'm going to respond to you later. You know who you are, bestie. But I decided that it wasn't aligned with me, and I was going to stop trying to force it. So when my messages started going unanswered, I just stopped reaching out. And that theory, like stop watering dead plants. And this can go for love relationships too, right? I'm talking about a friendship right now. But I decided to just stop trying to people please and stop trying to keep that connection together that clearly didn't want to be kept together. And, this person just completely stopped talking to me after, I responded a few times, no answer. So I thought, I'm just going to focus on me. And I actually found it very difficult to do that because everything, that wounded part of me wanted to hold on to it, or I felt like I needed to hold on to it. So it was hard for me to stop chasing, right? But I did it. And it went silent because I was no longer holding it together. I was no longer doing all of the emotional lifting. And something else I believe is sometimes when we hold on to something like that because of fear of abandonment, it takes up space in our life where something else could be. And shortly after that happened, I actually had another friendship enter my life. And then this past year, in November, some of you who listen to my love readings know what I'm talking about. This friend that just disappeared, right? Reappeared, wanting advice on, they pulled some tarot cards and they wanted some advice on what the tarot cards meant. And they said they were going through a difficult time. And I responded with what the tarot cards meant. And, I said, I'm sorry you've been going through a terrible time. Tell me more. I didn't, the old me would have argued or tried to fight with this person. Why haven't you spoken to me in this long? But I had released it. And I don't know, maybe this person was expecting that I was going to fight with them. Maybe they were wanting me to fight with them. I don't really know. But I answered them. And then I messaged them again because they didn't respond to me, even though they were the one that reached out to me. And even in reaching out again, I felt like it's the same pattern. It's the same pattern. I feel like I'm chasing, right? And a few days after Christmas, after I wished them a Merry Christmas, even though they never responded to me, told them I was thinking about them, they blocked me. And in the past, yes, it hurt in the moment when I realized I was blocked, right? But I realized that them blocking me, it wasn't about them abandoning me. It was about whatever's going on within them. Something unhealed, right? And in the past, I would have taken that blockage so seriously, or I would have felt that I'm being abandoned. But I just felt differently about it this time because I could see what was happening. I could recognize that it was triggering an abandonment wound within me. It took a lot for me to stop reaching out all the time because of that fear of abandonment. And I was much gentler on myself. And then a few days ago, this person randomly unblocked me. Didn't say anything. They just reappeared in my history on chat. Didn't say anything. They just reappeared. They just unblocked me. And again, I felt that urge to should I chase it? Should I reach out? And I just kind of let it be. But for me, it may sound simple to some people, but for me, all of that was really difficult for me to do and overcome. It sounds so simple when I say it out loud, but it was such a huge thing for me because it was triggering all of these wounds. And this measuring your worth from who chooses you or does not choose you. I used to feel like I wasn't worthy unless, I felt in the past when somebody blocked me like that, or when somebody went quiet, I thought it was a reflection of my worth. So I stopped measuring my worth from that external validation or from this person blocking me or unblocking me or whatever they're doing. And that fear, like this says, dissolved. And then again, when they unblocked me, I don't even understand what the hell's going on there. again, I didn't feel the need to chase it. I hope I'm making sense. Again, it sounds so simple when I'm saying it out loud, but when I was going through it, it was like very challenging for me to sit in that fear of abandonment and tell myself them abandoning you, going quiet, has nothing to do with you or your worth. And I think that a lot of us feel like it does have to do with our worth, or we internalize it. So I guess my point is, that's part of the way you heal these wounds, is you see when they're being triggered. Like once you're aware you have it and you see when you're being triggered, you can work towards not repeating a cycle, not internalizing it as a reflection of your worth, not trying to prove yourself, right? Because the old me, when they unblocked me, would have messaged them and tried to prove them of my worth. Anyway, I hope that made sense. You are not the echoes of the ones who walked away. You are not unchosen, unworthy, or disposable. You are sovereign. Your heart is not something to be proven. It is something to be honored. And as you step forward, no longer defining yourself by absence, but by presence, the roar of your own freedom emerges. The fear of being abandoned cannot haunt you when you no longer abandon yourself. And that's the thing. In that moment, I tried not to abandon myself. I tried to show up for myself and not internalize it as a reflection of my worth or anything that I had done. I knew I hadn't done anything. Except I stopped trying to earn that friendship. I stopped overextending myself. I stopped self-sacrificing. And that disposable word also triggers me a little bit inside, because in my love readings, I talk about when somebody discards you, how it makes you feel when they discard you, or when they... What am I talking about? I just had a realization that I did go through abandonment, but I went through it at age 35. With my family, where I felt like I was disposed of. And actually, it was that really triggered my healing journey. Anyway, sometimes when I read this book, I have like realizations while I'm talking to you guys. Interesting. Now I'm processing all of that. Okay, let's continue. So, journaling prompts. Again, to me, a large part of the healing is reflecting on these things, journaling about them, being aware of them, being able to see when you're acting from a place of fear of abandonment or fear of rejection. A lot of people with an abandonment wound struggle to put up boundaries, because when they put up boundaries, people will dispose of them or disappear. But even just that act of putting up boundaries and facing that fear of abandonment, even if you are abandoned, empowers you. It might not feel like it right away, but eventually it does. And one thing I always say to people in my readings is, if you put up healthy boundaries and that person pushes back or disappears or discards you, then they weren't healthy enough to be in your energy, and you did the right thing. And again, it might not feel like it in the moment, but you did the right thing putting up boundaries, and in time it will empower you and it will help you moving forward to set healthier boundaries with other people. I've even been at work situations, like I've never been able to put up boundaries, not with my family, not with my friends, not with work. And once I started doing it, I was able to do it more confidently moving forward. And again, remember, your boundaries are not about punishing others. They're about protecting yourself, keeping yourself safe, and anybody who takes them as an attack, hang on. And anyone who takes them as an attack or disappears or, again, abandons you, that's just showing you they weren't healthy enough to be in your energy in the first place. You know what? I don't know what I was talking about. I do have abandonment wounds from my childhood. When I was a teenager, I went through something where I was thrown out. Spent time on the street, in group homes, in shelters. I don't know what I was talking about. Denial. Anyway, so journaling prompts. So, ask yourself these questions and really reflect on them and journal about it. It's also very healing to do this, but it also, like you can see just reading this, I've read this multiple times in my readings to you guys, but even just reading it, things are coming up for me. When was the first time you felt abandoned, and how has that experience shaped your relationships? Do you fear being left, or do you fear being truly seen and then left? How do you react when you sense someone pulling away? Do you cling, push them away, or shut down? And this is where someone who avoids it can come from a fear of abandonment. So when they'll push someone away. This is anxious attachment. When you feel a difference in the energy or someone being distant, you anxiously attach. You start to overperform or try and prove yourself. In what ways do I try to prove my worth so people won't leave me? How have I abandoned myself in an attempt to keep others close? What do I believe about love and loss? Are these beliefs serving me or harming me? How do I know when I'm acting from a fear of abandonment rather than genuine connection? And this is what I mean. When you start to process this fear of abandonment and you start to think about how it shows up in your life in different ways, you can then learn to differentiate, if that's the right word, or use discernment when you're acting from a place of fear of abandonment, or if it's a genuine connection. What would my relationships look like if I trusted that love could be stable and safe? So if you believed love could be stable and safe, would you keep giving to situations where you had to stay small or self-sacrifice yourself, right? If I weren't afraid of being left, what kind of relationships would I create? What does true emotional security look like and feel like to me? So these are the ways that people show up when they have these wounds. There's two different things to read from here. A deep and persistent fear of being left behind, forgotten, or deemed unworthy of love and connection. This wound manifests as intense sensitivity to rejection. And this is what I mean by healing some of these. It's helped me with some of my neurodivergent traits, because ADHD, even some autistic people, struggle with rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So they take any type of rejection or perceived rejection. It can be as simple as, do you want to go to the movie with me, or do you want to go for a coffee with me tomorrow? And the person says no, and you take that as a rejection. Like very intense sensitivity to rejection. So by healing some of these wounds, it's helped me with some of my ADHD traits as well. A constant need for reassurance, an underlying belief that people will eventually leave. Relationships may feel like emotional battlefields where any distance, physical or emotional, triggers panic, insecurity, or a desperate need to cling. And even that one, Like as a child, I can remember I was very hyper aware of energy and when it shifted. And when I felt that energy shift, I would feel very insecure. I would start walking on eggshells. I would start being very quiet. Or I would start like internalizing, what did I do? Even like friendships, when somebody was having a bad day or they were being distant with me, I would feel like, what did I do? It's my fault. What did I do? How can I make it right? How can I overperform? I wasn't conscious of it, of overperforming, but it was like I went into that people-pleasing energy. There may be patterns of self-sabotage, and self-sabotage is as easy as knowing that a relationship is not healthy for you, but you continue to give to it, or you continue to stay in it, or cling to it, or shrink yourself. Pushing people away before they can leave first, or an unconscious attraction to emotionally unavailable partners. Physically, this wound can show up as tension in the chest, a lump in the throat, or sudden waves of anxiety when feeling disconnected. Over time, abandonment can lead to chronic loneliness, deep distrust of others, or an inability to feel truly safe in relationships. Watch for patterns of overgiving, people-pleasing, or staying in unhealthy situations. Reversal meaning, I always read that part, I don't mean to. This is how the fear of abandonment wound affects other people. Suppressing the abandonment wound by cultivating extreme self-reliance, emotional detachment, or an I don't need anyone mentality. Instead of confronting the fear of being left, it is buried beneath an armor of independence, hypercompetence, or a refusal to be vulnerable. So people who have a hard time with intimacy, commitment, things like that. This may look like dismissing intimacy, avoiding deep relationships, or keeping connections at arm's length to prevent potential pain. So when I read this, I even reflect maybe this friend had a fear of abandonment. And that's why I was blocked. Some may unconsciously test others by creating distance, seeing who will chase unconsciously, while others may choose relationships that are passionless but safe, where abandonment is unlikely. There may also be a tendency to become the one who leaves first, ending relationships prematurely to maintain a false sense of control. Watch for patterns of emotional numbness, avoidance of attachment, or an insistence on being fine when deeper loneliness lingers beneath the surface. Beneath the tough exterior is the same longing for connection, waiting to be acknowledged. And, just thinking about how I showed up in my connection with my partner early on. I definitely had a fear of abandonment, and unconsciously I would try and push him away, even though he's the nicest person that you'll ever meet. I looked for conflict, and I would unconsciously try and push him away, or I would even unconsciously end the relationship, seeing what he would do, if he would just get up and go, or would he try and convince me to stay. It was happening from a wounded, unconscious place. So it's interesting because I kind of went from that second one into the other one. I resonate with both of these meanings. Anyway, which brings us to attachment wounds. Because again, I believe they're connected. When we have a fear of abandonment, we can overly attach to things, right? Attachment wounds. And attachment wounds manifest in different ways. Again, for some of us, we hold on tightly. For others, they run. And I know I've always had attachment wounds. Again, attachments to jobs, attachments to people. I can remember even as a child, I struggled with this fear of abandonment and being like attached and codependent to even friends. I can remember in junior high, I'd have a friend, and then if they had other friends, it would make me feel really insecure. It would make me feel left out. Anyway, I had an attachment to alcohol. Attachment forms the foundation of our connections, shaping how we give and receive love. But when love is entangled with fear, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of losing control, it ceases to be love and becomes possession, dependency, or avoidance. And this is exactly what I mean about how these wounds can affect people in completely different ways. Some people become like really dependent. Other people want to detach. Attachment wounds whisper that love must be earned, that closeness is dangerous. Do you see the difference there? And again, oftentimes we keep attracting in this energy so that we can heal our wounds. And I think oftentimes we either, for me, I blamed myself and it was like, why do I keep attracting the same type of energy? Why are people always taking advantage of me? Do I have take advantage of me written on my forehead? It's because I wasn't seeing the lesson. So, that love must be earned, that closeness is dangerous, or that people will leave the moment we show our true selves. These wounds manifest as clinging too tightly, pushing others away, or cycling between both, never truly feeling safe in connection. But love is not meant to be held hostage by fear. True love for others and for ourselves is not about control, it's about freedom. And that's sometimes why it's so hard to be authentic. If you have these wounds, it can be really hard to be your authentic self. And again, when I was talking about, when I had to detach from my family, I showed my true self and no contact began. Healing an attachment wound is not about never needing anyone. It is about learning to love from a place of wholeness rather than emptiness. And that is why self-love and healing is so important. Because if we're lacking that self-love, it's kind of like, again, unconsciously we're searching it for outside of ourselves. And I can remember time and time again with my partner where I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel attractive. I didn't have self-esteem. I didn't feel this. I didn't feel that. And I would project it outwards onto him. You don't make me feel loved. You don't do this. You don't do that. When really, projection, right? So I was projecting onto him from a wounded place because I was lacking that within. And that's why, things like, how can you love someone? No, not that one. What I've learned is, how am I supposed to believe that anyone loves me if I don't love myself? Because if I don't love myself and someone else is telling me they love me, how can I trust that when I don't even feel love for myself? So my wounding, my attachment wounds, my fear of abandonment, my lack of self-love really affected my relationships. Who is eating? What are you eating? It is about trusting that connection does not require possession and that intimacy does not require self-abandonment. You are not unworthy of love, nor are you destined to chase or flee from it. You are meant to give and receive love freely, without fear, without attachment, without conditions. And when you learn that love is not something you lose, but something to be, you will no longer hold it with grasping hands. You will carry it within you, unshakable and infinite. Infinite? No, it's infinite and then finite. Language confuses me. But part of healing this is to stop abandoning yourself, is to stop running from love, to stop chasing love, right? That's part of how we heal these wounds, is to stop doing the behaviors that these wounds unconsciously cause us to do. So again, being aware of the behavior and then actively working towards not repeating that behavior or that cycle helps us to heal it. And then we realize that we attract in energy that we don't have to chase, or that we can be ourselves. Journaling prompts. Again, all the healing I've done is just like, therapy, but it's also reflecting about these things and recognizing, like, again, self-awareness is key. Because if you're lacking self-awareness, you can't see that you're doing it. You can't see when you're doing it. But if you're self-aware about it and you see it happening, you can work towards stopping that cycle. Like, I read the neglect wound in a reading I did earlier. I won't read it today, but I'll read it in another video. I'm going to read all of these. But the neglect wound, the moment you stop giving to connections or situations, even jobs, where you feel neglected, you heal that. And then you start attracting in reciprocal energy. Journaling prompts. How have my early relationships shaped the way I connect with others now? What patterns keep repeating in my relationships and why? So again, recognizing these patterns is very important. And probably again, these come up in love readings for me. So it could be a friendship that triggered this. But if you look back in your life, has this been a repetitive cycle where you've experienced it before? I didn't mention it in my mother and father wounding reading. Even my partner who listened to that said, you left a lot out. What happened to you as a kid? I did. But even I was punished once. Anyway, I was punished once. Because I went to school. I'm going to tell you this story. I went to school, and back in the day, at my school, we had like food tickets. So your parents would send money with you and you could get meals from the cafeteria. And I think that I was supposed to buy like a 5-day meal ticket. So I would have meals every 5 days or something. And I was 5. I was in primary. I don't know what that is in the States, but here it's primary. And the day that I went in with this money for this ticket, they were serving, I think it's called rapi pie. I don't even know. I don't even want to, I don't even like thinking about that food because of what followed it. I just know that I didn't like it as a child. What is it? Can someone explain to me what it is? Anyway, I didn't like what was on the menu. And I was only 5. I didn't really understand the importance of money, right? And even at 5, I was a people pleaser. So instead of getting my meal ticket and having to eat this Roppy pie or whatever it's called, I decided that I would get a bunch of people ice cream. And now looking back in this moment, I can see that was that little people pleaser in me, right? Trying to earn friendship. So I bought all my friends popsicles or ice cream or something. And then I was like really punished for it. Even though I was 5, like I think about it, if that was my child, I'm just different. I wouldn't have handled it that way. But I was punished for that. And again, now that I think about it, Roppy pie triggers me a little, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is. I just know I didn't like the way it looked and I didn't want to eat it. But anyway, I don't even know why I brought that up. Oh, it was because what patterns do I keep relating in my relationships? And I was thinking about even as a child, I was a people pleaser. I was, someone who, if one of my friends was over and they said they liked one of my toys, I would give it to them. What does emotional safety in a relationship feel like to me? And that's the thing, is that I didn't know what emotional safety looked like. I really had no idea what emotional safety looked like. And now, everything I've been through, I do know what emotional safety looks like. But for a long time, I would be in situations that weren't emotionally safe because I didn't know what emotional safety was. I thought that, again, stemming from a mother or father wound, a lot of this stuff, I would watch my mom be in like a very unhealthy dynamic and just stay there. So I thought, oh, that's normal. And now that I think about it, like my partner, very emotionally healthy and stable, wasn't used to it. This is where I talk about, as a child, we want something different. We grow up thinking that we want something different. And then that thing comes in differently. And we self-sabotage because it doesn't feel familiar, stemming from the word familial, family. So like my partner, very emotionally stable, very emotionally healthy. But because I didn't know, I'd spent my whole life in unhealthy emotional connections. Now that I think about it, I started self-sabotaging. That's why I mentioned, like, I was projecting outwards. You don't do this, you don't do that. I started self-sabotaging a really healthy connection. And then I had to go through a very traumatizing experience to realize what emotional safety does look like and how I sabotaged an emotionally healthy thing, if that makes sense. I'm trying not to say that. Anyway, this is what happens though when I read from this book. Like the wheels in my head start turning and puzzle pieces start falling into place. And like, I don't think I've ever realized that until reading that to you. So again, if we grow up not knowing what a healthy relationship looks like, we can become very attached to these unhealthy dynamics because it feels familiar. Do I detach differently to different people? If so, why? What fears surface when I start to feel close to someone? Have I ever experienced secure attachment? What made it possible? I mean, I can answer that. Healing makes it possible. And, being in an emotionally, what did it say? Being in a relationship, a friendship, a work environment where there is emotional safety, where you can speak up about your needs, and you can say your feelings, and you can say when you're feeling ignored or things like that. What would love without fear what would love without fear feel like to me? How do I maintain my sense of self when I'm in a relationship? What patterns am I ready to break when it comes to connections? If I could give my younger self advice about love and attachment, what would I say? Again, just thinking about all those things, reflecting on all those things, you can see what it's doing to me just reading. Like, I've read these before. I've worked on these wounds before, but even reading it again, it's like more puzzle pieces are falling into place. You know? So what patterns are you ready to break when it comes to relationships, to workplace environments? Because as long as we keep repeating the pattern, we're going to keep getting the same result. We're going to keep attracting in the same energy. Attachment wound. A deep and persistent pattern of instability in relationships shaped by earlier experiences of inconsistent love, rejection, or unmet emotional needs. This wound manifests as difficulty trusting others, fear of abandonment, or an inability to fully open up without anxiety. Some may cling tightly to relationships, seeking constant reassurance, while others may withdraw emotionally, fearing intimacy will lead to pain. Relationships often feel like a push-pull dynamic, yearning for closeness but fearing dependence, craving connection but expecting disappointment. This wound can lead to self-sabotage, unhealthy attachments to unavailable people, or emotional numbing as a way to prevent further hurt. Physically, it may show up as chest tightness, difficulty breathing during emotional distress, or digestive issues linked to nervous system dysregulation. Watch for patterns of anxious attachment, avoidance of deep emotional bonds, or recreating childhood relational wounds in adult connections. And what's happening is I believe that subconsciously we're trying to heal our relationship with our parents by recreating unconsciously the same type of relation you had with your parents. Anyway, who's eating? You're making me hungry. Suppressing attachment wounds by rejecting the need for deep relationships, becoming hyper-independent, or avoiding emotional vulnerability. Instead of acknowledging the fear of connection, it is masked through detachment, cynicism about love, or self-imposed loneliness. This can manifest as keeping relationships surface level, pushing people away before they get too close, or rationalizing that people always leave to avoid risking real intimacy. Some may compensate by over-intellectualizing emotions, using logic to distance themselves from deep feeling. Others may engage in relationships that are purely transactional or passionless to maintain a sense of control. There may also be a tendency to feel suffocated in close relationships, seeing emotional dependence as weakness rather than a natural human need. Watch for patterns of dismissing love as unimportant, avoiding deep emotional conversations, or convincing oneself that self-sufficiency is the only path to safety. Beneath the avoidance lies the same longing for connection, waiting to be embraced with trust instead of fear. And then codependency wounds. Codependency wounds. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. That even resonates to me in work environments, like overextending, overworking, setting myself on fire to keep others warm. Codependency convinces you love means sacrifice, that your worth is measured by how much you give, how much you fix, how much of yourself you are willing to lose for someone else. And again, most of this happens, we're not aware that we're doing it. And then we wonder, like, why am I always attracting the same type of person or the same type of energy? It teaches you to prioritize others over yourself, to mistake self-abandonment for devotion, to believe that boundaries are selfish. That's what I was taught, that boundaries are selfish. That loving yourself means you're conceited. And so you pour and pour until there is nothing left, hoping that if you give enough, they will stay, they will change, they will finally give back what you have so freely offered. But love that costs you yourself is not love. It is a wound disguised as loyalty. And you know, I said this about the neglect wound. It may even be love. Like, I don't agree that it is not love, because I believe you can be in that circumstance and feel love. But it's not healthy love. It's not healthy love. It's unhealthy love. And again, it took me experiencing some of these things to wake me up to some of my wounds. You know, this is the type of thing, this isn't a twin flame reading, but this is the type of thing that I talk about with twin flames. They're meant to reflect back to you your deepest wounds, wounds you don't even realize you heal. They're meant to bring these up to the surface. It's painful, and it allows you to heal them. So anyway, that's for another day. Healing from codependency does not mean you stop caring. It means you learn to care without losing yourself. It means recognizing that love is not something you have to earn by overextending, that you are not responsible for saving others at the expense of your own well-being. And this is something that empaths go through. Again, this is something that unhealed people go through, where they find themselves in situations that are very unhealthy. They're being mistreated. And they feel like they're responsible for saving others at the expense of their own well-being. I've been watching, there's these shorts that have been popping up on my YouTube, like short films, not shorts, but short films about wounds like this, or about going through like emotional abuse. And what's really sad is in the comment section, there's people like, if that ever happened to me, I would leave. And like, why would anybody stay in that situation? Because they're wounded. That's why. Like, I see a lot of people making judgmental comments about how they deserve it for staying in that situation. But it's like, it's coming from a wounded place. It's why so many people find themselves in this situation or these situations and feel like they can't leave. And even just somebody, I talk about this in my readings, the energy of someone being hot and cold with you, being inconsistent with you, being warm sometimes, cold more than sometimes, being mean some of the time, it makes you release cortisol. I believe I'm saying that right. And you become addicted to it, and you feel like you can't leave, or you can't speak up for yourself, or even worse, you feel like you can fix them. Love is not meant to deplete you. It is meant to nourish both giver and receiver. The moment you choose yourself, the moment you stop begging for the bare minimum, The moment you realize you are worthy of love that does not require suffering, you step into freedom. And in that freedom, real love finally has space to exist. Exactly. So if you feel like you're begging for the bare minimum, you're acting from that wounded place. And it can be so hard to stop begging for the bare minimum. It can be so hard to choose yourself because of these wounds. But every time you choose yourself, your power grows. Every time you choose yourself, when you come into a relationship or a job situation where you feel like you have to beg for the bare minimum or you have to overextend yourself, every time you make the choice, I'm not going to do this, you heal this wound. Journaling prompts. And you stop calling in the same type of energy. Where did I learn that love must be earned through service or self-sacrifice? I learned it through what I saw my parents' relationship as. That's where I learned it. I watched my mother do it. And then at a very young age, I started doing it. Do I feel guilty when I prioritize my own needs? Why? That's still something I'm working through. That's still something I'm working through this many years later. Why do I feel guilty about it? I know why. It's because in the past when I did it, I was punished or I was made to feel like I was being selfish. You know, I may have stopped apologizing to you guys, but I still struggle with it in my household. And I try not to do it around my kids as much, and I'm trying to get them to stop apologizing for existing. But I still do it. Like when I need to prioritize myself or I need to prioritize something I'm working on, I find myself apologizing to my partner about it and feeling guilty. Why are my eyes so red? That's weird. I look like I've been smoking something. I haven't. But my eyes are like, maybe this is triggering me or something. What do red eyes mean spiritual? Hang on, I'm going to go look it up. Interesting. It can symbolize spiritual protection, or it can symbolize caution, like a warning. It can also symbolize intense emotions that are going on within, like rage. Anyway, I'm not feeling ragey, but like, look at that. Okay, where was I? How do I react when someone does something for me with no expectation of return? I feel guilty. In what ways have I abandoned myself in relationships to keep the peace? Well, for me, I've put up with toxicity. I've shrunk myself. People pleased. Hid who I was. Lots of stuff. What emotions arise when I try and set a boundary? Again, I'm going to read the boundary one next time, I think, because setting healthy boundaries helps with stepping out of this cycle. And, you know, it is hard to, it's hard to set boundaries, especially when they're met with anger or abandonment. And that kind of, for me, when that happened, it made it harder for me to set boundaries next time. Some people can't even, they can't even set boundaries. It does get easier though, as you start to set those healthy boundaries. Again, the people who are healthy for you will be the ones still around you even after you've set the healthy boundaries. And just remember, if somebody reacts to your boundary or takes it as whatever, that's about them, that's not about you, and it's just confirmation that they're not safe to be in your energy. Do I feel anxious when I am not needed? What does that reveal about my sense of self? What would my relationships look like if I fully believed I was enough just as I am? When was the last time I made a decision based solely on what I wanted? How do I differentiate between genuine care and codependent attachment? What is one small way I can honor my own needs without guilt today? Codependency wounds, a deeply ingrained pattern of self-worth being tied to meeting the needs of others, often at the cost of personal identity and well-being. This wound manifests as an inability to set boundaries, a fear of abandonment, or an instinctive need to fix or rescue others to feel valued. There may be a compulsion to anticipate and manage the emotions of others around you. Prioritizing their happiness over your own. Over time, this dynamic can lead to exhaustion, resentment, and a loss of personal desires as one's sense of self dissolves into the roles of caregiver, peacekeeper, or emotional buffer. Relationships may feel imbalanced, with a tendency to attract those who take more than they can give or who require constant validation. Physically, this wound can show up as digestive distress, chronic fatigue, tension in the throat and chest from suppressing personal needs. Watch for patterns of people-pleasing, over-apologizing, and struggling to say no even when depleted. I still remember the first time I said no to that friend that I was talking about. I came on here and did a soul tribe reading, and I talked to you guys about how I was having such a hard time saying no. Such a simple word, no. The other way this manifests or shows up, suppressing the codependency wound by swinging to the opposite extreme, rejecting connection, becoming hyper-independent, or shutting down emotionally to avoid being needed by others. Instead of addressing the fear of being worthy outside of service, it is buried beneath a persona of detachment, aloofness, and complete self-sufficiency. This can manifest as pushing people away, refusing help even when necessary, or developing an aversion to deep emotional intimacy. Some may overcompensate by maintaining rigid boundaries to avoid any possibility of enmeshment, mistaking isolation for self-protection. Others may seek relationships that feel emotionally safe or passionless by remaining distant or keeping interactions surface level. Watch for patterns of fear around vulnerability, resisting healthy interdependence, or struggling to receive love without feeling struggling to receive love without feeling the obligation to give something in return. Beneath the armor of independence is still the same wound, waiting to be healed through balance, self-worth, and mutual connection. Well, yeah. So, again, I'm going to keep doing these for those who want to learn about it, because again, knowledge can empower you about these things when you can see the patterns you're repeating and work towards stepping out of those dynamics or putting up boundaries or learning how to say no. Very hard to do if you have difficulty with it and you have these wounds. No more people pleasing, right? Very hard to give up if you've been a people pleaser your entire life. Oh, shush. My Fitbit is telling me the battery's dying. Anyway, so my friends, I'm going to go. Oh, look, my eyes are getting whiter already. Clearly, I was like, something was happening internally during that reading. It also symbolized protection. So anyway, these readings, or sorry, it's not even a reading. These videos can trigger people's shadows. So maybe that spirit cautioning me that I'm triggering people right now. I don't know. Anyway, so thank you for sitting with me and reflecting about healing. I really hope that you listen to this, and not that I hope you listen to it. You can listen to it if you want to. But I hope that while you're listening, you write down those journaling prompts and spend time reflecting on them. Because like I said, I've read these before. I've been working on all these wounds. But even just reading it out loud to you, more puzzle pieces were falling into place for me during it. Like new awareness was coming to me. But yes, I'm sending you lots of love and light, my friends. Thank you for sitting with me in our healing circle. That's what it feels like. And I will be back to do another one in a few days. And lots of love and healing energy to you. You're not broken. You're not broken. You've just got some wounds. We're not broken. Anyway, love you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.